Guys, good Monday morning. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk with Keith Smith. Thank you kindly for joining us. We are live in Charlottesville, across Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world, on a Monday here on the I Love CVille Network. For our friends, the viewers and listeners that are watching in Albemarle County, real estate taxes and personal property taxes due today. Please get them in before close of business. Just a friendly reminder from your friends here at the I Love CVille Network. Judah Wickhauer is our director. If you could go to the studio camera first, my friend, and let's welcome a panel of experts to the show. Greg Slater is here. And, you know, Keith Smith told me last week that Greg Slater was coming. I got excited. I love when the guy comes on the talk show. He understands the concept, as I said in the pre-show, of what a talk show is about. And he just really does a hell of a job carrying a program. He joined us last time when it was just Greg and I, and we had a damn good show. We also have in the house Jim Duncan, a Twitter superstar, bicyclist. I guess is it a cyclist? Is that how, or is it bicyclist?
I ride a bicycle.
He rides a bicycle. He's a father. He's a husband. He's a partner at Nest, an associate broker, knows Crozet inside and out. And of course, the very distinguished Keith Smith is in the house.
And the grandfather, which
and the grandfather,
something
6 months old yesterday.
Yeah. Do you like being a grandfather? And what are you being called as the grandfather? Are
you happy? Still in negotiations as of right now.
Okay.
No, it's fantastic. He comes over, he plays, he leaves.
That's great. I know.
You know? Change the diaper and he's gone.
Yeah, that's what you say all the time.
You
give them back.
I tell you, we're on year number 4, right? And 4 years ago, I would have said, it's not a big thing. It's the absolute coolest thing in the world. Mm-hmm. You get to be the cool guy, right? Instead of the, you're not supposed to do this, right? You get to be the cool guy. And do you guys, are they local?
Oh yeah, they're 12 minutes from us, which is not too close, not too far.
Yeah. Ours is in Connecticut, and the soon-to-be is out in Seattle. So we do a lot of FaceTiming. We have like FaceTime breakfast every morning.
That's
on
fantastic.
that end of it, and it's interesting. So our oldest one. So my daughter calls me Dad, and my nickname is Pop. Right? We negotiated that. So my grandson calls me Pop Dad because he hears my daughter saying Dad. So to him, I'm a dad too. So
they're always listening.
We have our favorite, one of our favorite guests, and Greg Slater, who brought Crozet Creamery gift cards to us. Or
gotta share the love.
I gotta get the plug in for Crozet Creamery before we talk real estate and our friend Greg Slater. All right, gentlemen. Kevin Yancey's watching in Waynesboro. Folks at Long and Foster. Some of your friends at Nest. Some of your friends at Real Estate 3. Keller Williams is in the house. We'll get out of your way. Where do you want to begin, Greg, with today's market?
It's interesting for sure. I spend my time trying to find new ways to look at it to help understand what's going on. I mean, if you talk to people on the street, I wear a Nest Realty hat when I go play golf. I should stop doing that because I can't play golf without being asked, how's the market? And then someone repeating to me what they think. But someone used a word the other day that I thought was the first time I heard someone use it was he used the word plateau. Right? Some people like to say the word softening. And I started doing, honestly, if I showed you how bad it is, I started writing stuff down about it in March, and I write it down the same stats once a week. And this is how I kind of help describe how much the market has changed since March when things felt really tight. And I just looked at Albemarle County. And for starters, in all of Albemarle County in March, we only had 82 homes on the market. Now, we talk about the market softening and more inventory coming, but we don't have that much. We now have 188 homes on the market. And then I started looking at how many of them were on the market. We had actually been on the market over 10 days. In March, there were only 44, and now there's 129. So that's triple.
Over 10 days.
Yeah, over 10 days.
The fact that we're having a conversation that 10 days is like, whoa.
It means it didn't sell immediately.
Which is fine. 10 days on the market is fine.
Oh, absolutely.
30, 45, 60 is fine. I mean, I think that we're in a market now we are reacclimating to whatever the new market is. Today is normal, tomorrow is normal, whatever. But 10 days, 15 days, 20 days is fine. It's just the sellers need to get accustomed to this market, and buyers, my buyer clients are saying, house came on the market, can we see it in 2 days? Sure.
That's good for you.
That
means the psychology is changing a little bit out.
Buyers acclimate much more rapidly than do the sellers.
Yeah, typically, right? So the two taglines for this series of shows I'm doing is shift, right? And I was thinking about that on my 28-mile bike ride, 30-mile bike ride, feeling like this on that O shift. And the second part of it is a lesson from legends, right? You know, you guys maybe don't like me saying that, but you guys are legends. You've been around long enough to know what it felt like in 2000, what it felt like in 2008. Some of us for a little bit longer back on that. So, Jim,
let's get their take on that one. How's it different than 2008? Is that what you were going to?
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody asked that question on the show. Jim, why don't we start with you on that one?
It's different. I mean, I think that right now, in the 6, 7, 8, you had a lending market that was giving loans to anybody. If you had a pulse, you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage.
Pretty sure if you didn't have a pulse, you still got
and you
one.
could get a mortgage for well beyond which you could actually qualify. I mean, I had one client did a negative amortization loan, which is a terrifying loan product. But I think that we don't have that. Lending standards are more strict today. Lenders are having some look back to risk. So we have a market where lenders are actually qualifying their buyers. And hopefully the buyers are making good, thoughtful decisions. What you're seeing now, though, is I think a lot of the buyers are, at least for the last few years in my market, they're looking at a 5, 7, 10, 15, 20-year horizon. Whereas in the 6, 7, 8, they're looking at
minutes.
So after 25 months, I don't have to pay capital gains, right?
Yeah. Okay,
great. Then I'll sell in 26 months.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the biggest shift that I've seen in the difference between that market and this one. But it's different. I mean, I think you have a different buyer sentiment now. I mean, everything is different now versus that market. And yeah, I started in 01. So I've seen some different markets.
So 87, 88 for me, wasn't necessarily helping other people, but I was building and helping other people buy homes and all that kind of great stuff from the new construction perspective. And the one takeaway from that I've had with it, it's always different, right? It's always shifting. It's always changing. Mm-hmm. A VMI grad, I'm a Marine, adapt and overcome, right? Or shoot, move, and communicate. So we're always constantly changing. So Greg, what are you doing different now as far as communicating with buyers and sellers than you did in, say, 04, 05, or 08?
I try to put everything in a historical context. I mean, when you get to know certain segments of the market as well as I do, I can't tell you how many communities I've sold all the homes in as new construction that are now being sold for the second or the third time. I've been doing it so long, and at the end of the day, homes and locations can be ranked. And when you get into this low inventory environment like we're in, those differences go away because people have less to choose from. Because I was talking to an agent who was representing a buyer in Old Trail the other day, and one of these listings came on. I thought it was easily 10% overpriced, and in a year from now it might be, right? And we were debating it against another comp. I said, well, you have to give it something for this location. They're like, that location has no premium right now. Mm-hmm. I'm like, it will again someday. And the biggest mistakes I remind people of that I saw in 2006 to 2008 is if you have an A location, which is always going to be amazing, then you have B, C, and D. Well, when people started spending too much money on D and C locations, they're the ones that got hurt the most. Because when the market stopped, it dropped.
Do you see that coming back?
So what's different this time around for me is, I think the last time I was on the show, I went and I always go back and remind myself what the definition of an asset bubble is. Mm-hmm. And that is when an asset increases in value for reasons outside of normal supply and demand. And we had way more of that last time. If the mood of the buyers, when I talked about talking real estate on the golf course, in 2007, I had to talk it at every party. Everybody wanted to be an investor, and everybody didn't care that they were overpaying. No one cared if they had negative cash flow on their rental because they were playing. So the difference is in the run up to what really was a bubble, we lost the intrinsic value of buying homes for ourselves, and we started seeing them as houses that were investments.
But you did say about 15, 20 seconds ago that Old Trail or Crozet listing maybe next year could be 10% overvalued.
Yeah, so if you're reaching too far and appreciation stops, it's going to feel like that when it settles in. Because when that home has competition and there were 3 homes for sale, let's say in the high 600s, versus that home that has been pushed up to the 700s and in my opinion shouldn't be there, that's when but it's only going to be achieved or realized if they have to sell in a year.
So do you see a drop in price?
I'm seeing a little pullback around some of these big price points, right? There's some people reaching over $1 million or reaching above 1.2 now that are massaging their way back down on those major price breaks where things aren't selling immediately.
I mean, I think you're going to see less aspirational pricing. Whereas during this run-up in the last 2 years, you had people who would just throw any number out. And because there was such low inventory and such high demand and such free money, like all those things conspired to make it where people didn't care. They didn't care what they were paying, and the sellers could just throw any number and usually get it and get beyond it. So what we're seeing now is, one, hopefully sellers are sticky. Broad brush. It takes a year to 18 months for the sellers to acclimate to the new market because, Keith's my neighbor and he sold his house for X, and I want to sell it for X times 1.2.
And we're having a cocktail on the front porch, and I say, mine is X.
Right.
And Jim goes, ooh, I'm going to get that much for it. And that's where the skill of a trusted advisor comes in. So how do you have that conversation with a seller?
I tend to start with, one, I depersonalize the home from this. I use the word, it's a product. I use that very deliberately because it's no longer a home. It's a pure product on the market. And then you start talking data. You start looking at, one, what the data is, what the solds are somewhat relevant, but the pendings and the velocity are far more relevant. And it is also the experience of having done this before and having seen it.
So the words I use is it stops being a home and becomes a house,
Yep.
right? It becomes, this is not a home any longer. We're now in a business transaction.
Nobody cares that you raise 3 kids there.
Right.
Nobody cares about any of that stuff because they want to raise their kids.
That's
or
exactly
if they don't
right.
have kids, or that's where they want their dogs to be.
Or their grandkids.
Neil Williamson's got something for Jim Duncan specifically. Neil, welcome to the program. He's
Hi,
the
Neil.
president of the Free Enterprise Forum. Aspirational pricing, a.k.a. unrealistic pricing, is that what you mean, Jim?
I mean that aspirational pricing is unrealistic pricing in this particular market. 6, 9, 12 months ago, aspirational pricing was a number you would throw against the wall and often get it.
Yeah. The old spaghetti trick.
Well, more recently than that, in my opinion, to me, it's when you price a home and you don't have any comps to support that value of the home, but then you're looking at the supply. And I will tell you, one of the most valuable things in the world right now that hasn't softened is single-family homes on a half-acre lot in Crozet. Mm-hmm. Because everybody knows no one's ever making another half lot in Crozet. And so I see the market in very different segments. And so when I sit down with the seller, I try to figure out what the pin-up demand might be for that based on making phone calls to all the comps listing agents that had just happened and say, how many showings did you have, how many offers you got? So everything to me comes down to how many showings how many Zillow views, how many showings, how many offers, because those bidding wars are caused by having enough showings to have more than one people that want it that are willing to compete for it rather than think about it in terms of its actual value. That's what's going away first in this market. And that's why we're seeing homes on the market over 10 days.
So also usually I've seen over the course of time that happen, and then the homes on the outer end of the rubber band, right, from the center, starts kind of getting a little soft.
Well, is that what we're seeing with Waynesboro?
I don't.
We got
think,
Kevin Yancey here.
I don't
watching.
think so, and this is a unique dynamic in Waynesboro. And we've talked about this all the time. When gas got to $4 the last time, it just dropped. Last time, the time of great unpleasantness in the other side, it just dropped. It's the opposite that's happening right now. We're seeing a lot of, at least I am anyway, a lot of growth.
Are you expanding footprint to Waynesboro, fellas?
Not me personally, no.
Not me personally. I mean, Nest has a presence on that side of the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Got a take on Waynesboro?
I don't. They do. I mean, one of my favorite phrases is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That market is vastly different.
I don't know that market. I just refer business over there.
Same.
But when it comes back to trying to figure out what the bleeding edge of the market is, whether or not we think it's going to take so long to figure out where if these values are really coursing course or just cooling off. And the one thing I always have said that is the leading indicator of the market, or just follow the big builders, because the big builders are very methodic in what's happening. And we are, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen new communities with new price points, and they've already retreated from them with just in 30 or 60 days. And that's a simple math.
They don't have any emotion.
No one's coming through their model. right? And when no one's coming to their model,
Literally.
what do we have to do to get people to come to our model? And that's a base price lowering. And so when that base
It's
price...
also a product difference, too, and we just talked a little bit before we went live. Some of these subdivisions have been in the pipeline for so long, they were based on product decisions made 5 or 6 years ago, not what happens today.
But don't you think it's the mainstream media hammering the interest rates increasing, scaring people? And we also have open houses now being incentivized by agents and brokers with gas cards and coffee gift cards to get people to come to the open houses.
Open houses are back because there was like a gazillion of them last Sunday.
So, well, what does it really take to make the values unwind? Me personally, I think, if we never catch up on the supply side, they won't unwind that far. They may level off for years. Who knows? But when the new construction sales drop enough that it impacts the cost of construction, that's the clue I'm looking for. Because right now, the builders who are lowering their prices aren't doing it because it got cheaper to build. They're doing it because they need to drive traffic.
So they're just shrinking their margin, is what you're saying?
Sure.
That's all they're doing.
Some of it's a little cheaper to build. Lumber,
But the labor market's crazy.
The labor market is crazy. But you're 100%. That's the reason I wanted.
And dirt's expensive.
That's the reason. That's the reason I wanted to talk today, because you're definitely a new construction expert. I've dabbled in it a little bit myself, but I wanted to bring a word up to Jim to take his take on it. I'm using the term deceleration.
I knew you were going to say that. Decelerate. We spend too much time together. What do you think of decelerate? It's turning into the meme, that word, for this market. Decelerate.
So everybody understands appreciation, right? Everybody understands depreciation, and I just prefer the word deceleration because we're not going into the depreciation mode, but we are decelerating in prices. We're definitely not decelerating in volume of sales just over the last 90 days, right? On that end of it.
But I think so. I think yes, we're seeing some deceleration. I think we're seeing lower velocity. Things are moving at a slower pace. I think that you're going to see more inventory is going to come on the market, which is going to slow down the velocity of those sales. I don't know. Again, it's don't publish this. I don't know that we're going to. I don't know that we're going to see a drop in value.
So this guy's on the internet
he
forever.
Reminds me of God. We like almost 4 years, a gazillion amount of hours together. You understand, Smith? This lives on forever.
Lives on forever.
But I don't know that we're going to see I don't know that we're going to see a crash. I don't think we're going to see a drop in value. I think we're going to see.
That's right.
People who have achieved X equity over the last 3 to 5 years are going to have less equity.
That's the first time we've heard that word on this show. Right there.
So I'll push back a little bit on that. I don't think they're going to receive less equity. Their percentage of gain from day one is going to be back to the normal 3 to 4.
Well, they expected $200,000 in appreciation over the last 4 years, and they might get 180 or 160, which is again historically fine.
But here's the thing.
I think I'm going to write deceleration on top of this. Because that's how I felt yesterday.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get to going in reverse, but.
All of these
zones, you talk about the market unwinding and sellers being able to be patient and to ride it out. Now they're all sitting around with 3% interest rates.
Do they have to even sell?
That's right. Yeah. And so it's going to be harder.
Why would they sell? When they got nothing to buy and their rate's going to be the lowest it's ever going to be in American history.
I had a guy I was riding with a few months ago, and he said, how do I get out of my 275 mortgage?
When you said, why would you want to? Is that what you said?
Yeah, no, I said, I don't know. I mean, I think the asset in a lot of ways is that 275 mortgage, and not necessarily a house.
So this brings up a conversation we had, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, Jerry and I, that my fear was 275 was normal. Everybody said that's normal. That is not normal. Normal 7 point over from 1972.
Which is easy for us to say because we've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody, my mom was selling real estate in the early 80s at 18%. Okay? My first loan was 8 1/8. It's easy for me to say 6 is fine.
You should say it.
Don't say it.
Don't say it.
18% interest rates.
Don't say it. We won't say it.
I've heard it too many times in my career. But I want to go back to your deceleration question.
No. What I was going to say, hold on. Are we doing Bert and Ernie on this one, or we're doing Greg and Keith? We're doing Greg and Keith. Got it. My first house was 18%.
Slater just called that you were going to say that. You used that too many times.
When I got into the business in 1996, the core group of realtors in our market were still recovering from those interest rates.
My hearing aids ain't picking
and I had to
up,
hear about it every board meeting at Carr for years.
18%?
18%.
Arlene Yobbs, welcome to the program. She can relate to what Keith just said right there. She said this on the show.
Arlene was my first Lessons from the Legends guest, and that was a great
She was
great
fantastic.
conversation.
Chris Jensen, watching the program right now. His mother, the late, great Pat Jensen,
Amen.
a legend in the game, Pat Jensen. So much is jumping in the mix here.
Let me ask you a question.
Please.
This is the stat I found that I actually look at every day now in Albemarle County because I think it explains a lot about the challenge we're still faced with in this market. We can talk about deceleration. We can talk about inventory growing. We know from watching the national stats, for the first time in history, the median area sold price in this country broke 400.
Yep.
Do you know what right now today of all existing inventory in Albemarle County that's for sale, which there are
That include attached or detached?
everything that you can go buy today
New
that's
construction
not
as well?
proposed,
Got it.
Okay.
there's 230 listings.
Paper houses count in that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Just existing homes.
Okay.
What do you think the
Under four.
median price of that inventory is?
No way, under 4.
No. I was wondering, the question was going to be how many is under 4?
Oh, no.
No, he wants the median
The
price.
median. So the national median for everything that's sold
Was
this
just
year
cracked 4.
is just
It
cracked
doesn't
4.
have a 5 in it, but it's awfully close.
I'd say my guess would be 535.
That
Yeah.
include new construction?
Yeah, he said new construction.
Okay,
Anything
There-
available.
there's only a few specs in the marketplace right now.
Five,
This is your
3, 5?
choices. If you were going to buy a home in Albemarle County right now, how many are half below, half above? It's $628,000.
I wrote down 575.
And so, and in the last 2 weeks, I look at every day, and with this few homes on the market, it can be very volatile. That number's bouncing between 575 and 675 just over the last 2 weeks. But that's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen.
And that's so troubling.
It is troubling.
Yeah. Well, it's troubling for first-time home
So
buyers in particular.
the market can only has to decelerate enough for it to bring enough homes on the bottom end of the market back on.
Well, that's the reason why you and I put so much time in the land trust to try to help housing affordability and try to make a difference on that end of it, which is much harder now since we're at 6% than 3%.
Hard to impossible.
We got a lot of comments coming in. Chris says thank you for the mention of his mom. He said, Pat would love to be watching this show right now with this panel. Chris Jensen, your family, A-plus people. Saw Brian the other day, Chris. Throw this to you from Jamie Turner. Jamie Turner watches the show regularly. Mayor of Gordonsville, Jamie Turner. Greg Slater, when you were on the show last time, you dropped a bomb about the townhomes. Can you give us an update on the townhomes and where they stand now? Yeah.
So we've only sold a few of them because what we realized when we got into it, there was a little miscommunication between the owner and the property manager, and a lot of leases were renewed. But I've closed 3. I have 1 under contract, and I have 2 more that I'll be listing probably in the month of July.
Fantastic.
So, Jim, where do you think the first-time home buyers got to go now?
Somewhere else.
Man.
I mean, it's, I hate to say it like that, and that it's not a flippant response, but
It's a factual response.
first-time home buyers are going to, and it's a challenge because you drive to qualify to Waynesboro or the lake or the further flung part of where we live. And now with gas being $4.75, $5 a gallon, that drive to qualify doesn't really help anymore.
But what's their option? Because rents are doubling. So what'll happen is the purchase prices will decelerate, right? It'll get a little. Rents are on the appreciation side big time, and I just trying to figure out where the equilibrium is, if there is even such a thing as that.
I don't know. I think it's something that it does keep me up at night thinking about where the market's going to start next time, because you need those first-time home buyers to come in and buy and then sell in 5 to 10 years, and then the cycle continues.
And the reality of it is to kind of misquote Neil Williamson, more houses for everybody, right? So if we get more inventory, and this is the world, this is the sewer I swim in a little bit. I just don't see it happen. It is going to happen on the other side of the mountain, though. That I can assure you.
But I think that we have the opportunity in Charlottesville and Albemarle on the urban ring to bring more density. And I've been saying this on Twitter quite a bit and writing some about it, that from a market perspective, we need to reimagine how we exist.
How do we do that?
What does that mean?
It means we need urban.
Is this upzoning you're talking here?
It's probably, but I think that the stuff that's going on in Seminole Square, I think that with the apartments there, I think will be huge. But it needs to be combined with jobs and with the appropriate non-vehicular infrastructure where people can walk or ride bikes places. And that's not just me because I like to ride.
Sure.
It's because it's a hell of a lot cheaper to ride a bike than it is to, spend money on. I mean, a car is like $400 to $600 a month.
And it's good for the environment.
And it's good. I mean,
Safe.
It's
and
safe
healthy.
and healthy, but I think you have to look at it differently than always push people into cars to drive to qualify and bring that housing into the urban core.
So we do these roundtables regularly with elected officials sitting in these two chairs, and this was 4 or 5, 6 months ago, I can't remember. There was a lot of pushback about growing. I think it was Diantha McKeel on growing the.
Diantha McKeel came on here, board of supervisors, and she said we have 5% for commercial and residential real estate in Albemarle County, and right now it's not at full capacity. That 5%. So why would I even consider expanding the growth area, the developmental
Because
area?
a lot of it is
That's
not,
what she said.
A lot of it is you can't develop it, right? So that 5% isn't 5%. On that end of it, but there was pushback from the growth of it, and I don't disagree with you, Jim. I think you need to grow that growth area or that urban ring a little bit, but they also have to approve projects.
Well, they have to approve projects, and I think it's a systemic deficiency, not just Charlottesville, Albemarle, which I think that my lens is that it's not good here in that regard, but it's a national thing where we don't approve enough development close to the urban core. So I think you need to have it has to be a look, years and years ago, I was in a meeting when I was back on the board years ago, and the city came in with their 5-year plan, and the county came in with their 5-year plan, and UVA came in and it's like, so here's our 100-year plan. They execute projects in a way that the localities cannot.
But the localities can't because they don't have the institutional memory to execute those projects.
And they also have a focus on getting reelected.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
and a little pushback on that, Jim. You're talking about the comprehensive plan?
This is 15 years ago. And
So they're required by state law every 5 years
Right.
to do that. So that's the reason why they're in 5-year chunks. That doesn't mean they can't sit down and have a strategic plan separate of that and say,
Right.
this is our strategic plan for these many years out. So that's just to push back a little bit. That's
Neil
I'm
agrees
not here
with
to be
Jim.
pushed back on.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, Neil agrees with Jim here. He says in many localities, the regulatory hurdles restrict new construction product adjustments to reflect ever-changing consumer demand, and that's perfectly reflected by 24%. The cost of new construction is red tape. $400,000 home, $100,000 of that is red tape. It's paperwork.
Right.
And we represent a boutique custom builder and Dominion Custom Homes, and he said the market right now is as challenging as it's ever been. And he's trying to finish profit rich.
Yeah, so, simple things like 3 months to get a building permit. And so what's happening is Fulvana County is getting looked at, Louise is getting looked at, the other side of the mountain is getting looked at because in Fulvana, you can pull a building permit in a couple of weeks. Right? And so they're being hard look at because that 2 or 3 month lead time, that doesn't include, I can't get inspections during the building. And oh, by the way, forget about a CO on that. So it's many months that are added to a.
Well, how about windows and garage doors? Didn't you say a home sold in Old Trail, the Pareto Homes, our boy Christopher's house, without a garage door?
Yeah. Let me give you another stat I've been following that is super intriguing to me. I started following it monthly about 5 months ago because I work for a builder, and every month he's selling 10 homes and closing 2, right? And I'm like, how many homes are in the backlog of new construction in Albemarle County? When I first looked at it a few months ago, it was in the mid 200s, and I watched it every month grow until the month it broke 300. 300 homes that had been sold that needed to still be built or were some stage of construction. Last month it dropped for the first time, just barely, and as of today it's at 284.
That's a great stat.
So explain that. What does that actually mean?
284 people are waiting for their home to be built or waiting to get a building permit. In some cases, they were waiting for the lot to be platted in front of it. That's a tremendous amount of stress. If you are supposed to get your home by the end of the year, and now these homes are all trying to get first you wait for the foundation guy, then you fight over the frame, and it's just there's a tremendous. The backlog is going to cause delays and challenges, and you take the labor component to it. Some of the builders have more influence over these forces than others, but it's just a good barometer of how far behind we are on inventory we need.
And that's nationally. I mean, nationally, the number of new homes that are under construction right now is the highest I think it's ever been, which is going to be one of the more challenging things we have to face, and why the deceleration is going to take time, is that inventory needs to be burned through. And so
Well, it needs new inventory because, Jim, we dropped in 2009, 10, depending on, from 2 million units a year to a couple of 100,000.
Right.
We flatlined it for a decade, right? It increased a little bit, whatever it is. But I think you're 100% right. I think we're going to probably approach that 2 million number sometime this year, which we have not done in well over a decade. But, is now the market impacting that, and that's flatlining. The thing I wanted to get from you, Greg, was, so you're saying people are canceling contracts.
They're just, so historically, I tracked this for a decade because I would do these same stats when the contracts happen. I'd go back and see why they're different. Historically, about 10% of new home contracts get canceled for some reason or another. It may be because builders were so aggressive they take home sale contingencies and they'd never work out, but they like ringing the bell, putting one on the scoreboard to keep the momentum going. So about 10% would die. From probably mid last year to this year, it went almost down to zero. Because if you were under contract, what's scary thing about this number is, I didn't pull it today, but usually then I go pull in how many of those have been pending for over 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Because everything technically in a perfect world could be delivered in 6 months. And so half of those have probably been over 6 months. And those homes are getting more costly to build.
Right.
While they're waiting to build
So
them.
you're saying the builder's taking a wash?
Well, no, so this goes back to your cancellation.
COGS, contingencies, escalators?
Cost contingencies are in there, and those were
But not in all the builders, though.
Well,
not in all the
now
builders.
they probably are.
But my
Now
point
they are.
is,
Yeah.
for 6 months,
Not like Stanley Martin or Ryan. They're not.
Because they got burned in early 2000. I bet they all have the COGS contingencies now.
But here,
I can
Or
assure
early
you,
2020, excuse
I
me.
can assure you they don't. I'm doing a couple of deals right now.
Really?
They do not have that in their contract.
But they also build so rapidly that I think that the challenge for them is less than the builders who take.
So
6 to
what's
9 months.
happening is they were waiting longer to put the homes, say, hey, this is now ready to take contracts on it. You're going to see that start walking back.
I sold one of theirs a few months ago, and new construction hadn't broken ground yet. And you went to them, and they said, "All right, here's the house. You may not choose anything."
Until such a date.
No, you
At
may
all.
not choose anything.
Yeah, that's going to start changing.
Yeah, as it did last time.
Yeah.
Right? When the market corrected last time, builders had to take a different tact, and they had to address the buyer's needs and wants a little bit differently.
So again, one of the reasons I wanted you two gentlemen here is because I think new construction is usually the leading edge of what's going on. And if you start following the big guys and follow the money, you're usually going to follow with we talk about I don't know, right, which is a great answer. But we have enough experience to say, okay, look, if this is what's happening, we can somewhat predict what's going to happen down the road based on historical factors. Keeping in the mind that, there's what we don't know, right?
So the unwinding of all those sales is interesting because at first
great
the
stat.
cost increases, which were significant, So I watched addendums get done that should have been 10%, that the builders were splitting it, and they were getting whacked for 5%. If you bought a $600,000 home and got a $30,000 bill you weren't expecting, that was pretty scary. It wasn't causing a cancellation. You know why? There was nothing else to go buy, and if you cancel it, they're going to raise the price and just sell it to somebody else.
Then again, at 3%,
Yeah, but fast forward to today, we're starting to have
6% makes
the
a
interest rates are becoming a problem, and it's maybe there is something. Maybe just maybe a resale came on you could pivot to. We talk about the
checks enough boxes.
Yeah, we talk about the supply side problem. So this is another stat I pulled. We can't compare just to last year, right? Because we know 2020 was here, 2021 was here for sales, and we're honestly
18.
about the same as 2020 when you look at all these numbers, but not on inventory. In the end of the second quarter in 2020, there were 582 homes on the market in Albemarle County. At the end of the second quarter last year, there were 281. Right now today, there's 229. We haven't even got back to the pandemic mess up, right?
Which is going to be interesting when that inventory hits a 500 and rates are at 5.5 or 6. It's going to be a vastly different market than a generation of home buyers have seen.
Right.
I had a conversation
And
with,
realtors.
And
We'll
realtors.
see what that's going to do to the realtor base.
So that's every county in the area is not even back to where we considered the bottom during the pandemic of the inventory. We're not even back.
There's a hell of a lot of realtors in car right now who've never seen a market like this.
well, this is-
Who are about to come into a market like this and say, I thought real estate was all about cash and commission checks. And now they're going to be like, shift.
That's the reason that's the reason I titled it a couple of months ago, "Oh Shift," right? And the lessons from legends, because the folks that have been in this industry that never seen this or even understands what we're talking about.
Well, and I think what's going to happen is they're going to leave the field. You're going to see the profession shrink, and then you'll see 10% of the agents doing 90% of the business.
I'm pretty sure you're there already. I think one of these two gentlemen can probably stat that anyway.
I don't know the equilibrium for car. I could probably guess, but I can tell you around my presidency of car, we had gotten close to 1,100, and
you're over 12 now.
But during the Great Recession, we got closer to 700.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of people who just chose to make career changes or had to go pay the bills some other way.
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing. You know, I built quite a few hundred of homes. Went through the time of great unpleasantness. Lost everything that we had on that end of it. But the drywall guy just got out of it,
right.
And he went to work for Walmart. And when the market picked back up, the drywall person went, "Hold it! I'm in a warm place. I'm getting health insurance. I got benefits, and you want me to go suck dust? Yeah, I don't think so. I'm staying over here." So you're going to see a lot of that. It always goes this way when things are getting adjusted a little bit. But just to kind of get your two gentlemen's read on something. So I've been for the last year following a week over week, right? And it's all the 6 jurisdictions that cars in Charlottesville, Albemarle, Nelson, Louisa, Greene, and Flavanna on that end of it. And so the last 7 days, there was 102 new, this is everything, 102 new homes on the market, 84 went into pending, 76 were price changes, and we'll go back and talk about that in a minute. 3 months ago, 90 days ago, it was 50, not 102, so we've doubled inventory. The pending was 40. We've also doubled it. So my brain is like, okay, even though the volume is a little bit bigger, we're proportionately growing. We're not actually really gaining a lot of traction on it. It's just more buyers coming into the market. But we were price changed 90 days ago, 12. We're at 76 now. And those 12, because what I do is I print out the report, were all price increases. 76 is all price adjustments or decreases. So any comments
I want
on?
to know why you think it's doing that.
What? Well, I'm asking the question.
I would tell you, part of it's got to be.
See that thing right there? Real talk with Keith Smith.
I gotta believe part of it is agents not understanding the market or how to convince their sellers to price it appropriately to sell.
Price too high.
Yeah, they came out of it too high. Sure.
I mean, one of the things that Greg and I've talked about for years has been that, you know, regardless of the market you're in, pricing correctly from day one is critical. I mean, you know, I think that you said it years ago that, you know, you price it to go under contract in under a month. That was the previous market.
That's right. That was my strategy for sure.
Yeah, but I think that's still
because if you miss that, you miss the
You missed that if you missed, and this previous one has been, you know, regardless of time frame, if you missed that first wave of buyers, you're now waiting for a life change. Marriage, divorce, kids, move, grandkids forcing you across the country.
What's wrong with the house?
You want to make a match with pin-up demand. That is the best buyer for your home. And if you miss the pin-up demand or there is none, and it's very hard to measure, but like I said, you got to research everything that's going on in that segment of the market to kind of have a guesstimate. Before I price a home with my clients, we have a conversation about how many listings, how many showings that I think will be caused at each price point, and how many buyers within there might be based on what happened in the last 30 days in that segment of the market. But right now I have to tell them 30 days ago is a long time.
Yeah.
So I've got a new listing coming up here by Lachlan Hill on the same conversation.
Great neighborhood.
Excuse me?
Great neighborhood.
Great neighborhood.
Yeah. Albemarle County and City of Charlottesville. So
it's in Albemarle County. It's like right up against the line on that stuff. Can't get into too many details because we're not ready to hit the live button yet on that end of it. But to Jim's point, that conversation had, pricing matters. It always matters. Same situation. Well, my neighbor sold it for more than the number that I think that's where the market's going to be. And that's where the experience comes in and the stats come in and say, look, you know, we're trusted advisors. You know, I think if we went his number, which was substantially higher, we would go to your point. It would sit for 10 days. It would sit for 2 weeks.
Well, and then your first conversation is going to be...
What's wrong with it?
What's wrong with it?
Oh, yeah, sure.
But first conversation with the seller and the realtor is going to be after 10, 14 days. I have a theory of 2 weekends of disappointment. And once you're through those 2 weekends of disappointment, then you're going to say, all right, how fast do I need to drop the price? If you drop it $3,000, the agent's going to say, all right, well, they're starting. If you drop it $20,000, you need to get that will more likely move it to being under contract.
So to your point a little earlier, Jim, it was interesting conversation because he said, so what do you think, about a month before I get a contract? And I went, whoa.
So he's a sophisticated buyer, or seller, excuse me. He knows what's up.
He's a sophisticated seller, but that end of it, I expect it to come out of his mouth. So we're going to get a contract the first weekend.
Yeah, how many hours?
Exactly, or minutes or seconds and stuff like that. So maybe...
How'd you answer that question?
I said, yeah, we're going to do our very best if we price it right. Right, that could potentially happen. But as the gentlemen know here, the last thing you ever want to do is say, yeah, we're going to have it by such and such a date. So to say I danced around the...
I have a twisted way to look at things. That's all my years of managing brokers and coaching agents. Some agents, though, don't mind that listing that's overpriced that takes longer because they see it as a business opportunity to generate leads and have something to market.
Yeah, brand recognition.
Yeah.
But I think that, to Greg's point, one of the more important things is that when you're pricing a home, two things. One is the conversation with other agents in that market band, because this band is way different than that band. And knowing, you had a listing and got 12 offers, cool. You had a listing and got 2 offers. That's a vastly different pricing.
That's all I want to know.
But you're pricing that home for your seller vastly different than between 2 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also we're in June. If I talk to a seller in April,
pretty darn close to July.
If I talk in April and we're pricing it at X, July 1st is going to be a very different price, perhaps.
I've had more than one conversations with the agents in a very localized segment of the market we live in that the craziness, the top of the craziness was about the 3rd week of April.
I would agree with that.
Which is fine.
And rates at the 3rd week of April were high 3s.
Yes, I think that one of the important things that we can do with I think we're all seasoned. I think seasoned is the word for old. For seasoned agents is
Thank
to...
you, Jim.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I include myself in that.
I could say talented.
Is to be calm and to be
Dynamic.
rational and to be understanding and empathetic of the sellers and the buyers.
Sure.
We've been here before.
Sure.
It's going to be fine. March and April are gone, and we're in July and August, and it's a very different market. And it takes a different conversation and a different conversational strategy with that seller and the buyer to understand what we're looking at.
I tell people all the time, we're not in sales. We're in education and therapy, right? Really, at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're in an education business.
There's a lot of therapy.
And a lot of therapy.
Well, one of the best things I think came out of this market is a lot of therapy among agents, because for 12 to 18 months, we were all scrambling to try to figure out what was going on and how to do the best job we could do for our clients. And the level of collaboration that started occurring and the level of information we were sharing with each other to come up with best practices for how we navigate the whole coming soon thing versus how we share that data you otherwise never asked for, how many showings you had and how many offers you got. You never went backwards.
One of the most helpful things that I saw was that we reached a point where you were 15, 18, 23 offers. And I had buyers and we lost a lot because I gave them good counsel. Mm-hmm. But we lost a lot of offers. But the agents started to email and I started to email saying, hey, this sucks for all of us. I'm having to tell 23 agents and buyers that this is where we are. So for your knowledge, there were 23 offers. 6 of them were cash, and goes through the breakdown. These had no home inspection. Broke down how the offers broke down. So I could tell my buyers, several times I said, we lost, but I think you won. And this is why. So I think that was, from a collaborative perspective, understanding and sharing that empathy with the other agents and the buyers, I think was huge.
Do you think that's going to last when the shift really gets into...
I don't think so. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be a shark frenzy because there's not going to be enough listings out there.
What do you think, Jim?
I think that you're going to see... I think that you're going to... I'd like to see, the optimist side of me is that you're going to see agents will continue to be empathetic and to share, but we're not going to have to share that anymore, I don't think. We're not going to have 23 offers on houses. I think it's going to be a different... it's always different.
It was the difficulty of the market that caused it. When we get back to something that's a little more explicable, I think some of that will go away. But the best part about being in Charlottesville or Carr is that, these 10, 15, 20-year group, these agents, we work together. There are isolated incidents of people who aren't cooperative and maybe not the most fun to do a transaction with, but for the most part, it's good.
Mm-hmm. You're getting props from David Gregory Mitchell. David Gregory Mitchell is asking where your pink cat is, and he's giving you some props right now. You got Jamie Turner watching the program with a very good question, and I think since Jamie's posted this question, we've answered it. He tracks the markets closely in Orange, Gordonsville, and Culpeper. He has rental property in Orange, Gordonsville area, and he lives in Culpeper. The new construction in Orange and Culpeper is seeing price adjustments every Monday in the downward direction.
Yeah.
Are you all seeing this in Charlottesville and Albemarle? Greg has highlighted and covered that answer very well.
There's a couple of places, look, when you introduce a community to the market, right when your model's open and there isn't traffic standing around to start making those first sales, you have to pivot pretty fast.
But is that product driven? In other words, are you seeing that more in attached versus detached?
So far it's been attached.
Yeah.
I think, there's another, I don't want to pick on any communities, but I've seen some price points in the last 60 days for new communities. But here's the other thing. My favorite saying of the pandemic was, this market is proving seasoned veterans wrong every day, right? I mean, got more wrong than I got right a lot of times.
Yeah.
Well, this market...
But it's getting to a point, there's just some things I just don't think the market can tolerate at 6% interest.
No, but I think that I was listening to a podcast the other day with an appraiser, and one of the things he highlighted was that just because an agent's been doing this for 20 years doesn't mean they know what they're doing. So I think that's why it's critical for us to have these conversations and dialogues to always try to get better.
So we have Woody Fincham coming on Wednesday to actually have that conversation, that very conversation.
You're going to ask him, how do you appraise a home without any comps? Support that value?
Well, maybe if you chime on live.
Woody's watching right now.
That's an art form because they have to do it all the time.
So apparently Woody now knows that question.
Greg Slater getting props from Jacqueline. Is it Morsing?
Oh, that's my mother-in-law.
She says you guys
Jackie,
are brilliant,
happy
especially
birthday.
that Greg Slater.
Birthday today?
She's about to turn 80.
She's about to turn 80.
God bless her.
The very talented and beautiful Kay Slater watching the program.
I took
right
the
now.
trash out, honey.
And giving you guys some props right now. Mustache Dan Pettit of Real Estate 3, he says, good morning, guys. We all live during higher interest rates. Just be patient during these times and continue to educate the seller and the buyers and newer agents in our firms, and we will pull through this. The architect, J.B. Styes, is watching on Twitter. Sun Boys, I think is his firm. He's the architect and principal.
Some bios, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Thank you for correcting me there. So, gentlemen, this is a phenomenon that we haven't really touched on that's coming in with comments. The people that got interest rates in the low 3s, high 2s, or even in the 4s, with rates going higher and higher and higher, what's going to compel them to sell? And when do we start discussing the phenomenon of the low rates of the pandemic impacting inventory 7 to 10 years down the road when most people choose to sell their homes and rates could still be high at that point?
Anybody want to jump in?
I mean, I think that the market's going to continue, whether it's 18% or 8% or 2 or 6. The market's going to continue, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be very different than it was before. But I think that if my friend who said, how do I get out of my 275 house, God help him if he has triplets, he's going to sell his house.
Because his life circumstances said, I got to sell my house.
Life forces change. So I think that that's always been the driving force in what we do. And I had a client years ago that, a long story, but I remember she called me the day she found out that she was pregnant with twins. And said, I know we wanted to be in this house for 10 or 15 years. We need to move now. Life forces shifts.
That is one of the things that really is a difference between what I learned coming out of the recession was when the music stopped, all the elective moves stopped. And the elective moves were happening more and more. And I called it intra-Charlottesville moved. Oh, I like this, but I can rake this equity and go get that I want more. And then we boiled it down to how many people were really buying and selling because they needed to move and somebody else needed to buy it. And that's when I actually just started tracking how much buying activity was going on, because those were the buyers that were making things come off the market when everybody was standing around going, pick me, pick me.
Yeah, we're in such a different dynamic now with the remote work that we're seeing. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, you had people moving intra-Charlottesville, intra-Albemarle. And now you have people coming from Seattle and Portland and from bigger cities to Charlottesville, Albemarle. So you didn't have that. I mean, Nelson County, if you looked at the numbers in Nelson County, holy cow.
And that's because of the fiber they have out there.
But that shifted, though. That shifted. If you take a look at Nelson County hard a year ago versus now, that is slowed down quite a bit.
It's slowed down, but because they have fiber, and because you have remote workers, people are able to that's now an option.
What? You go.
Please.
You go.
No, please.
We have these stats and everything, and I'm always reminded of how different the world looks at the intersection of supply and demand where we live, right? The baggage that comes with emotionally or economically for the seller and the buyer, and how we get them together and make that all work. And so ultimately, to keep this market going, of course sellers will have to change their expectations if they need to sell, but buyers are going to have to change theirs too for what they're going to get to buy. And when you talk about the ability, the scary part to me, this virtual nature of employment now, is that it will continue to bring buyers here that have very big incomes that choose to live in this market. And
Jerry,
across the street from me. Literally.
Jerry has been preaching that for quite some time.
I saw it with the folks across the street. They sold a 1-4 townhome in, I want to say it was in McLean.
Yeah, I have a neighbor who just did that too. They sold us something that would have been $300,000 here for $900,000 there, and they're in their 30s and they spent $1.2 million.
They sold 1-4
and kept the job.
Right. That's what they're doing.
But gentlemen, that's nothing new, right? I remember in the late 80s and the early 90s at Lake Monticello, not because of internet, but they'd sell their house on Long Island, right? And you lived through it.
But the difference is that they're keeping their jobs.
The Great Invasion.
And
these were retirees now. So these were people retiring. They said they were done with the rat race. They were done with paying $30,000, $40,000 a year in taxes.
Well, I remember back before we started Nest, I was at my first firm. I had a board with all my transactions, and an agent walked in and said, where are your buyers coming from? And I looked at the board, had like 14, 15 transactions underway. Like 80% were from out of the area.
Really? Is that because they had 4 years at UVA and wanted to move back?
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them who go to UVA and they go away and then they come back.
So are you tracking that now? Are you seeing that situation the same, or is it intermoves?
I mean, it's both. I mean, I'm not tracking with the same narrow focus, but I think that what you're seeing, though, is you are seeing people who are coming from other areas. And they've always done that, but the keeping the job aspect is something that, again, you're seeing that shift also, where some companies are saying you're moving to a lower cost of living area, so you're going to take a price hit.
True.
And I do think some of this market, when you see these price points get to a head-scratching level, that, if somebody owned a home for 20 years and sold at this point, they did very well. So it really doesn't matter what happened to the house or what interest rate they had. If they owned it long enough and bought 20 years ago and got to this point in time, they came here and could absorb whatever damage they were, especially if they were moving down.
So I'll share it with you two gentlemen. I'm running a 20-year spreadsheet, and I'm doing it in all the jurisdictions. And the reason I'm doing 20 years, it includes the time of great unpleasantness on either particular side of it. In Albemarle County, the average appreciation was 5.5% over that 20-year period, right? So to your point, if you buy and hold, it's eventually, even if there's a dip, it's eventually going to catch up to you. I just don't see seeing a dip because prior to the time of great unpleasantness, they were producing 2 million, 1.8, 1.
Right.
These are nationwide. That just hasn't happened, and I just think the upward pressure on pricing is just going to be in the low single digits instead of the high double digits, but it's still going to be there.
Which is much better and much healthier. I mean, I think that to your point a minute ago, I had numerous buyers who they started at 450 or 5, and then as rates doubled, they're more than that 350, 325. So I mean, I think that makes it a much different market. I had some buyers who said we were, whatever that number is, but we can afford more, so we'll look lower, so we can be more competitive.
Or they bring more cash to the table,
Exactly,
right? And that's what I'm seeing a lot of. I'm seeing a lot of, 3% is free money for all intents and purposes, 6% not so much, right? So I'll bring, because I sold my townhome, I'll bring an extra $100,000, whatever
Or
the
the
number.
market's in the crapper, why keep it in the market when you can put it into bricks and something tangible?
You're talking about that market.
Yeah, we're talking stock market.
Well, I think housing is, in the first correction of my career, and then this one, in a lot of ways, was a commodity, and it's not a commodity. It's for most of my clients. I had one client who paid cash for his home several years ago, and I said, here are our thoughts on resale, and here's what we're looking at. He said, I don't care. I'm buying a place to raise my family. I have my money elsewhere, which he was lucky. I mean, he was lucky and privileged to have.
But that's not normally the case, though. Normally,
no, but he said, I'm going to be here for a number of years. I have job and life stability. I feel comfortable saying if I lose $5 or $10,000 or whatever, okay. So I think that we're seeing that, again, that long-term perspective is it's a home to raise families.
So we're all pretty successful. Okay, let me rephrase that. You guys in Yona are pretty successful at this real estate game.
I paid my mortgage like 4 times this year. I'm good.
There you go. But I will tell you, everybody that I deal with, they don't, the conversation of interest rates always comes up, but that's not why they buy. And to your point, Jim, they buy for life moves, or they want to be closer to grandkids or further away from grandkids, whichever their situation might be. They don't sell because of interest rates or buy because of interest rates.
But the interest rates are clearly impacting this market. The
I don't
media is
agree.
hammering
I
us.
literally disagree with that.
It's not I don't think it's the media. I think it's the fact that my buyers are looking at 3% at 450, and then at 6% they're looking at 350.
And they can't afford it.
That's not the media. That's reality. So again, when my wife and I bought 18 years ago our third house, we've been in the same house for 18 years, and we've seen ups and we've seen downs and we've seen ups. And frankly, I don't really care because I don't pay attention to it because we're not moving. So I think that, I've got one neighborhood in Crozet. God help me, I've sold numerous homes there, and none of them have sold because they're all happy there. And I think
they buy and hold. They stay. They raise their family.
They raise a family, and I need their kids to get older so I can sell those houses.
Well, that was the original reason we created home ownership in this country, right? Keep it. Pay it off.
90 days ago, there was 40 contract, 40 pending in the week, and now it's 84. So people are writing contracts at 6%.
Again, the market will be okay.
Double the amount.
It's just the fact that we have this short-term mindset of rates were at 3 and now they're at 6. And yes, that's a huge shock. But once the market hits that equilibrium of volume and understanding,
I think this time around, Jim, that equilibrium is going to come a lot faster than we had in the past because the buyer and the seller is far more educated than they were even prior to the time of great unpleasantness.
Well, I think that now we have Zillow. And I think the pricing on Zillow is inaccurate. For most of the time, the pricing on Zillow is not.
I'll take what my house is worth.
You're talking
on
the
Zillow.
Zestimate.
The Zestimate.
Yes. So,
it's a number to look at that drives a conversation. But I've never had a seller say, after we have that conversation, the Zestimate says it should be X. We should go there. No, it's a conversation point. The views on Zillow are impressive, but I think it's a matter of saying everybody has the same information. It's how you interpret that data and how you look at it through the historical context.
So that's why you hire a trusted advisor, right?
Who has experience, who is not dependent on not forcing a sale, but saying, I need to sell a house, pay my mortgage. I think it takes time to build the experience and the understanding that it's going to be okay.
So
that's a good take right there.
So how do you two gentlemen feel about the future of our industry in this market? Are you bullish, bearish? What do you think?
I'm trying to figure it out every day.
Is Charlottesville recession-proof? Is Central Virginia recession-proof?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Okay.
It's 18 months behind Northern Virginia.
I can tell
the
you
bad
it
stuff
isn't.
will happen somewhere else first.
Okay.
Maybe we're a little more insulated, and it takes longer to get through there. But I keep coming back to these inventory stats because right now, even with the price increases we've experienced in the last 2 years and the interest rate increase, people are still buying houses every day. But when you're half of where you should be in inventory, those interest rates are designed to slow that demand and let this thing fill. It's just, the inventory is just trickling up right now. And the only way we got out of the last one by ripping the Band-Aid off was all the banks dumped all the property on the market and everything adjusted massively and it leveled off. But there's I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's not. My outlook is it could be a very long time before we sort this inventory problem
I
out.
think the only inventory bump that we might get a little bit of is, and I don't see it happening, frankly, is if all these folks that are buying rental properties, onesies and twosies and threesies, go, and that might increase the inventory a little bit.
But why would they do that if rents are out of control?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if there's a shift in the rent.
I'm getting $19.50 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in the villas at Southern Ridge.
So if
it's a condo.
So if that should plummet, if that should shift.
That's not going to plummet, though.
Everybody gets to choose what they do with their rental properties. I've had a lot of conversations about people who are like, oh my gosh, this thing's worse than I've ever thought it would be. I'm going to sell it because I hate having a rental anyway. That helps. But
and then what would they do? 1031 or just pay the
take
tax
the hit,
exposure?
Do something else with it.
It depends on how much they net gain on it and all that stuff.
But in our market, I think that it's years and years ago. Donna Goins, we were at a luncheon for new construction during the crash. Correction. And I was young, I had only a few years in. I said, Donna, how's the market? I'll never forget this. She said, Jim, the market is. I need to represent my buyers this morning, and I got to help my sellers. The market is. It doesn't matter. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And I think that's my answer, is that the market is what it is. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's 6% or 8% or 3%, because it's today Monday. Monday, I've got buyers that need help and sellers need help.
I think today's Monday.
Today's Monday.
That's right.
It's a pandemic.
I like
it's
that
all
take as
the
well.
same.
That's a good take.
We all tend to work a lot of days,
Yeah.
and they all get blended in.
Your Monday
Well-
is your Saturday.
Here's the number one stat I follow to answer that question you just asked. This year, well, through the end of May, I can't run the June numbers yet because they hadn't happened. In Albemarle County, we are 164 listings short of what we did for the same period last year. So we're not catching up yet. And we are, but I take it, we're catching up a little bit. We're 248 contracts short.
Yeah,
So sales have declined faster than
and that's picking
listings.
up.
And yeah, and so as that gets in line, we'll start to see that inventory grow faster.
So Yona and I take a walk every morning at 5:30 in the morning. We do our walk. We kind of say, "Hey, what's your day going like?" That's our half an hour, 45 minutes. And so she says, "What are you going to talk to Jim and Greg about?" I said, "Oh, we're just gonna see how the conversation goes." And I said, I got to tell you, honey, I have not been more excited about the real estate market now than I've been in years.
That's what you said?
And she goes, "Are you really going to say that live?" And I go, "Well, maybe I shouldn't. Well, maybe I just did." But I'm actually super excited about the real estate, mainly because I can. We all have got this visionary ability, right? And I know that I can help my clients because I've got the skills to help them, and a lot of other agents do. But I'm actually excited about it because I want it to be normal. I don't know what you think, Jim. Should I not have said that?
I don't know what normal is. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're right, though. Again, the previous correction, it was throwing a sign in the yard and you sold a house. This one, throw a sign in the yard, you sell a house.
Yeah.
I think this is going to take, again, more skills that a lot of people hopefully have developed. And the cold skills are going to warm back up again, of data analysis and being empathetic and being understanding, listening, and all the things that we try to be good at are going to matter more than they have in the few years prior.
You nailed it. During the great time of uncomfortableness.
No. You got to write it down. Time of great unpleasantness, which is Monica Neil Williamson has done.
Time of great unpleasantness. Here's
I call it a real estate
Love Greg.
depression, not a recession, but that affected me a little
I
bit.
was never more valuable
Right.
in my career in this
Absolutely.
industry during the most difficult times.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
And I knew exactly what you were saying. So yes, I don't like the difficulty for my buyers and the stress that comes with it. It's very difficult it's harder to be a buyer than anything else in this market, and it's going to continue for a while.
But we have the skill set, or most of us do, to hold the client's hand.
Well, it's like the clients that we have that are in the restaurant space. I say to them, I check them, and I'm like, "Are you worried about what's going on? You got labor, you got cost of goods, you got inflation, you got all these issues, all these headwinds." And the ones that have been doing this for a long time, that have good balance sheets, that have cash positions, say, "Bring it on." It's just going to erode our competition. We're going to get more market share, and we're ready to prove what we have to offer.
But I think
That's literally what they say.
one of the things that we have the experience with, for better or worse, is that we've seen bad.
Right.
I've seen my clients have suffered because of decisions that were made in one environment, and they're in a different environment, and it's a painful experience. I mean, the counsel we give impacts the rest of people's lives, and that's something that is terrifying and humbling. That the decision that my buyer makes today, and if they have kids, is going to affect that kid's grandkids.
No doubt.
And I think that's something that I take very seriously in what I do, because what we are tasked with when we do it well is helping our clients make really good decisions. And sometimes it's saying, "Please don't do this."
Yeah. And how do you handle that conversation? Because a lot of folks can't handle that conversation. They say, "Look, I know, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Or "I don't know," right? Those are very hard words for folks to say in our industry.
I ask questions.
Yeah.
I try to not give definitive answers, because it's like a kid.
Yeah.
And not to say my clients are infantile, but if you tell a kid no,
Yeah.
they're going to do it. But if you ask questions and have them have that dialogue, and you step back and they logically work their way through it.
So a lot of this has to do with what I did when I was in the Corps for a half a decade, but Yona hates this. I'll always answer a question with a question. Mm-hmm. She goes, "Just answer the question." "Well, no, I need more information."
Right.
Right? Or In my case, I don't hear half of the question on the end of it because, she did this the other day. She says, can you get me a hat? And I showed up with a cat. So, because you're an idiot, but that's besides the point.
But it's, if to Greg's, that house that he's talking about is 10% overvalued. If you have a buyer who pays 12% over, or whatever, I know that's a bad decision. And so the question is, if you have to move in 3 years, what will you do?
That's right. And it may not be the wrong decision. And in that case, they were getting a big gift. They were going to have a mortgage they could afford, and they might put at risk some of that equity if they had to sell short term. And so I often I'm not afraid to tell somebody I think it's a bad idea or it's overpriced. I usually tell them before the showing's over.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If I'm prepared enough and I understand that, I'm not afraid, and I'll show them why and what they're going to need to spend money on in addition to overpaying for the house. But at the end of the day, over time, the biggest expense you have owning a home is interest. So if you can figure out a way while you own that home to curtail interest faster than at the normal rate,
and how do we do
you're
that?
hedging against any future market problems.
How do we do that?
Extra payment a year.
Extra payment, lump sum payments, if you have the right kind. There's a bank in town now that has what's called, for $250, they'll recast your loan. So if let's say you hit the lottery and have $100,000 and you have a $300,000 mortgage, you don't have to, refinancing is expensive.
Yeah.
So you can pay them $250, give them that $100,000, they'll rerun the AM for however long it's left.
Yeah, they just lower the principal by that amount and rerun it from starting point.
It's like a free refinance is what it is. But I thought of it, you said something we've seen bad, and it reminded me, I'm going to give you a Frank Balloff joke. You know what the difference between...
Southern Frank Balloff.
That's right. You know what the difference between country deer and city deer are?
What?
Country deer been shot at.
So is that an allusion to the 3 men at
We've
this
been
table
doing
have been around the block?
That's right.
I think city deer gets hit by a car.
Greg Slater.
No, they just stand and look at you.
Frank Bailiff making jokes through Greg Slater on the show. I love it. Jason Howard says, and he shares a link. This is crazy. Jason, thank you for sharing this link. A 2-bedroom apartment at Stonefield, the new apartments they're building, they're starting at $2,040 a month. Yeah. And he shared the link to the apartment
think that's
complex.
Sustainable. I think
$2,040 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment.
If they get it, they get it. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the market.
I think they'll get it.
The market will decide. But
Yeah.
I think that as we bring more apartment inventory on, I think that it's that's going to be a good thing for that market. And you bring on more apartment inventory, and people are paying different rents. They might be able to save more for the ultimate purchase decision. But I think that to your point also about one of the things that when you buy a house is you look at that opportunity cost also. Mm-hmm. So I've had clients who've been stuck. One in particular I'm thinking about, he had a job opportunity somewhere else, but he couldn't sell. And so they stayed here and they were stuck for a few years until the markets reached a point where they were able to sell and move and take a different new job opportunity. So I think it's again, what we're talking about in a lot of ways, yes, it's financial, it's economic, but it's also life guidance, for better or worse, about what if you are here for 7 or 15 years.
So to talk about how do you have a difficult conversation, I had a client this weekend, a millennial, and I love working with millennials because I find at a certain point, this iPhone I'm holding in my hand, they put down and they actually say, Greg or Jim, what's your opinion? And if you ask me that question, actually I'm going to give it to you even if you don't ask it, but they wanted to, because they were in the construction business, they wanted to buy a fix-up. And they found something actually in your neck of the woods. And we were looking at
a
it.
fixer-upper in Old Trail?
No, not
Come
in
on
Old
now.
Trail.
Crozet. Okay.
And not even in Crozet, but let's say your neck of the woods.
Okay.
On that end of
Central Virginia.
Okay, in Central Virginia. But I actually talked them out of it, and maybe that's the wrong way of saying it, but I gave them education. I said, look, well, time out. You're going to pay for this. You're going to put this much to it, which is great, and all that stuff. So how long are you going to stay in the house? Oh, 5 years. I said, yeah, that math's not going to work. Right? So I handed them a spreadsheet. They're both spreadsheet geeks. I said, go home and run these numbers on you on a 3.5% appreciation. And they call me out, yeah, we're going to look for something that's finished. Yeah. So it's just a matter of what your skills are. And, for me, because of my background, I can look at something pretty quickly, say, that's about what it's going to cost you to go ahead and do it.
How are your estimates? And I say that because I've never built a house or done renovation, but over the years, I've become fairly adept at estimating things. And during the pandemic, my numbers were just wildly off. Windows went from $350, $400 a piece to 800.
Well, you also made the point on Twitter, because I follow you on Twitter, if someone wanted to open a handyman business in the area, they would absolutely crush it. Because there's no one that's...
In a million, you could not pay me enough money to get into construction business right now.
Well, look at what, like we mentioned, Dominion Custom Homes. John Kerber launched a sister company, Charlottesville Remodeling Company. And the Charlottesville Remodeling Company is banging on the door constantly, where new construction slowed a little bit.
So a lot of that, to answer the question, a lot of that is just like what we're talking about here. A lot of it is skill. Also, a lot of it is art.
Yeah.
Right? I would say most of it is art on how to interpret what's going on. I have another client that we're going to put a house on the market. The HVAC system went out this weekend, right? And so how much that's going to cost? And I gave him a number. I was within $500. It was close enough.
Did you say $5,000 to $7,000?
For this house, it was a little bit north of that. But it was 12 grand was the number I threw at him. It turned out to be 13, right? The first question is, okay. The second question is when, right? And that was the harder question. Yep. The answer is
Especially when the AC's out in June.
Well,
right.
It's just
everybody,
everyone's calling.
Who are you going to call?
Try getting an AC unit.
Yeah, right.
Couple questions to wind down from viewers and listeners here. This one is from Jennifer, who's watching in North Downtown. What is the luxury market? Please ask Greg and Jim that question. I think she's looking price point now. What's the new luxury market price point?
Well,
we had an agent say on this show that $1 million wasn't luxury anymore.
It's a good question, because I happen to be working with someone whose budget is 1 to 3 right now. So I've seen everything on the market and watched everything that's sold in the last 30 or 45 days in the 2 to 3 range, and it's very interesting. There's just so much less activity there. But one thing is, that 1 to 1.2 range probably doesn't make you feel like you're spending $1 million ain't what it used to be, is the way some people say it. But it's those homes that should have been $800,000 to $1 million that got pushed up past. Look, price breaks are $100,000, $250,000, $500,000. $1 million is the biggest price break there is, really. And so to have people come down here and can easily afford stuff in the over $1 million range. I had a stat at one point. I think the average number of homes in Old Trail in its inception since 2004 that sold over $1 million was less than 1. It took like 18 months to absorb a $1 million home in Old Trail.
What year was that?
From 2004 to 2019.
And now
we had like 8 a year, and we've broken 1.5 twice.
My answer to that is actually stolen from Jonathan Miller, who's an appraiser in New York, who's brilliant. And talked to him a couple years ago, and he said that his definition of luxury is the top 10% of the market. Whatever market he's in,
sure,
that's the top 10%. The top 10%.
Fair assessment.
So I think that I think that for me, I see that as being like I need to look at the data, but 1, 2, and up, generally.
So real estate is 5 things: location, price, features, condition, and timing. It's always location driven. All real estate is location driven. The luxury market is even more so now, right? So back when 90 days ago or 6 months ago, the 1 million quote unquote top 10% might have been a little bit outside of the normal bullseye, but we're now back in the normal bullseye. So you need to look at where the location is first, and then the numbers will backfill that a little bit.
The other segment of the luxury market that we didn't talk about that Jim and I lived through, and Jim had the land grab for expensive home sites in Western Albemarle during the pandemic was nothing anyone could ever predicted. 200 went to 300, went to 350.
You're talking lots.
Yes, and so those are future luxury homes, because if you buy a $250,000 lot, you might keep it under 1.2 when you build, but now it's even harder. But when you spend $500,000 on a lot, you're building a $2 million home.
You've got to justify it.
Yeah.
It's interesting you should say that. I have a client looking for a lot to build on in your neighborhood, right? But not
in Old Trail?
Not in a HOA. They're looking for the...
I've got one. Low HOA.
Fox Chase Landing?
Fox Chase Landing and Fair Hill. Hi, Dave.
We'll talk offline. No, we're not allowed to do specifics.
I think that was a challenge. When we had Fair Hill for, I think we had it for 5 or 6 years, and then
wildfire.
Boom.
Well, the reason I bring it up is they specifically do not want any HOA, right? This is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
So there was lots around, or parcels around around 10 acres and under that's been sitting on the market for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days.
Turkey run.
Literally in the last 2 weeks, gone. Just like evaporated.
Well, that's what happens when you have no inventory. People pivot to new construction. And then it's one thing pivoting to a production builder that's selling you a home and lot package to pivoting to having to navigate buying land and then contracting and, working with Christopher. We've actually taught a class. He taught it at Nest. We were meeting so many realtors who didn't know. They called us, my buyer can't find a resale. How do we do business with you? And we were teaching realtor after realtor how to go through that process.
So, gentlemen, this is, unless we have another question?
Last one. John Blair, hey, welcome to the show. Love you, John Blair. The last question is for Greg. Jim, I think you can offer some perspective as well. Mercer McGill on your page.
Mercer asked the question?
This is the question. Would you sell your home in Crozet now if you have a life change? Is this the top of the market for Crozet?
I would probably peel into a little more of that. That's a deeper conversation. I don't think, just like the stock market, I never advise timing the market.
Right.
Because I know people that tried to time the market in 2020 and left 10% on the table. And I will give you a different perspective there. I have a couple of rental properties that I thought about selling, and I've decided for two reasons I'm not going to sell them. One is
your rent's 12% increase
no,
year over
my
year?
son's 17. I want him to be able to have a home when he gets out of college.
There you go.
And the other is, hopefully this is not political, but eventually climate change is going to impact there's already really strong analysis of what migration that's going to cause in this country. And Crozet just happens to be the catbird seat, even Charlottesville. And I think someday, 20 years from now, it'll be worth even more than we could predict.
So it's not political, it's a fact.
But that's why I'm holding mine with Mercer, but I'm happy to talk to you about it.
But if I go ahead, Jim.
Let me hit that real quick. I talked to a client over the weekend.
Did you just pick up a client there?
We know each other well.
They're climate refugees. I have several climate refugees who come to the Charlottesville Albemarle area because where they're coming from is not going to be sustainable living in 5, 7,
My
15
Villa's
years.
tenant is a refugee from Afghanistan.
I'm talking about Florida.
You're talking about climate refugees.
Okay,
climate
gotcha. Sorry, I thought you meant global policy.
I've had
refugees.
clients. One client said one of them came from Louisiana where they had flooding, and one came from out west where there were fires.
Yeah.
So, and we're a safer bet. Nobody's safe, but we're safer than some other areas.
It's interesting. I think you're 100% right. I think you'll see more climate reasons moving than political or anything else. And we could say
It's
climate is somewhat political, but it depends on which side of the fence you're on. But the reality of it is you're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of that. We call them halfbacks, right? Went from New York to Florida, right? And now we're like, I'm coming halfway back. And there's other reasons to go ahead and do that. But to the question about the term is Old Trail at the top of its market. I take issue with that.
No, they say Crozet.
Crozet.
Yeah.
Crozet. I take issue with that because if we just agreed that over 20 years we got a 5.5% appreciation, the price today is just going to increase at a slower rate.
That's right.
Right? And so the top of the market.
What is the definition of top? Does it have to go down 10% to qualify as a top? I mean, we're past where values were in the last top. Now.
So there's really, to me, I'm just an old jarhead, so it's easy for me to, top means you're at the top, so that means at some point you're going to drop down. The top is just, instead of going straight up, it's just going a nice, gentle, well, it's not even that, it's just a nice, gentle 3, 4, 5, 6%.
My answer to that is always it depends. I mean, how do you define top? I think that, so I think is now the right time for you to sell? And there's no way to answer that question without having that in-depth conversation about what is your situation.
I advise strongly against trying to time the market. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
But it's always life change things, right?
Yeah.
That's generally where it's at. So, gentlemen, we are running substantially.
No, we're good. This is a great show. These guys are fantastic. I am mindful of their time and his time. He's got to get ready for the next show.
I hope you guys had fun. Thank you for doing it. The invitation is wide open.
Yeah. Dude, you're good.
Do it again.
Both you guys.
My wife laments that I could talk about real estate all day.
Do you have to turn it off when you get home?
I don't bring it in the door.
You don't?
No.
You turn it off as soon as you walk in?
I can turn it off.
You can?
Sure.
Can you, Jim?
I've tried.
It's tough,
I'm
right?
I'm better now than I was at the beginning of my career.
I have a hard time turning this off, too.
So my partner's my wife for 36 years. So
Well, you don't have to turn it off because you work together.
It's harder because we literally have to make a conscious effort. So on Sunday, after my after my death ride that I had over so that just put it in perspective, Jim. My highest elevation change in the last 6 months for that was 600 feet. That was 2,000.
Was this with Quentin?
This was Quentin. Yeah. Yeah, it was brutal.
I'll tell you about it right after this.
It was brutal. But the point I was trying to make is that we said, phones off. We went out to the brewing tree. We love oysters. They had some oysters there. We played cards, and we said, we refused to talk business. And we did that for 3 or 4 hours and had a great time. But so for us, it's really hard. We got to really shut it off.
Nice. Nicely done. This was a great show, guys. Jim Duncan is a principal partner and associate broker at Nest Realty. Greg is an associate broker at Nest Realty. And we encourage everyone watching the program or listening to the show to get to Crozet Creamery and support this business. We love Crozet Creamery. Keith Smith is a partner at Yes Realty Partners.
I think I am. Mrs. Smith said I was.
You're still a partner. It still says it on your Facebook page.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Got
You're good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Good.
So
she has access to that.
I know. Dude, I know. Everything.
That's
Judah Wickhauer is our director. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is Real Talk with Keith Smith. The show is archived at realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. The I Love CVille show is up in 54 minutes, guys. Take care.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well done.
It's always a pleasure.
That was excellent.
Thank you.